Welcome to the meaty part of the curve, 30 minutes of fundamentals, tech, teaching, and talk. We are your hosts, Jeremy Bond and Kendra Brown. We'll be here weekly, hosting a webisode featuring special guests, surprises, and straight talk about the day's instructional challenges. The views and opinions expressed on the meaty part of the curve are exclusively the thoughts and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Central Michigan University. All right, then. You'd think after this many weeks I wouldn't need to read that message aloud every week, that maybe I would have committed it to memory. But alas, no such luck. Your mic is still on, Kendra, and I think it's maybe feeding me back. See, here's the deal, folks. Those of you who were with us last week remember that I used the wrong microphone for most of the show, and the audio was a mess, and a number of you were with us last week and helped us discover that issue. Today, about half an hour ago, I discovered that the microphone we prefer to use is actually in use about 75 miles away right now in another meeting. So Kendra and I are in the same little room together, which is normal. We're going to be okay on that part. But we each have our own individual microphone today. So we'll be doing this sort of slalom tennis match, back and forth kind of thing, turning mics on and off. And so there could be some interesting moments when one of us forgets, when both of us forget to turn one off and to turn one back on. But regardless, it's a good fit for today, I think, because I'm a little tired anyway. This turn taking will make things interesting. On Tuesday morning, I left for Indianapolis, Indiana, and Kendra, that's one of your favorite cities, correct?
My favorite, for several reasons, but most all personal reasons, but it's a great city. So welcome back, by the way.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back. I was down there exclusively for business purposes. In fact, it was my first time attending. First time ever attending the EDUCAUSE conference, and it really is something if you've never been. I was there just with a day pass, so this was quite a whirlwind trip. Fortunately for me, Amy went along and drove the whole way, both ways. She likes to be in the driver's seat, and it was good for me.
You've got a good egg there, so yeah.
Yeah, she's spectacular. But given that I was just there and sat in on a couple of sessions, I thought we would maybe step back through some of that as part of our conversation today, because there were lots of interesting things about the meeting, but I was actually there because of, I guess, the gratitude of Respondus. And when I was at Blackboard World back in the summer, they'd asked me to be part of their presentation and talk about our experience adopting their solutions here at Central Michigan University. And I guess I must have done okay for them at Blackboard World, because they wanted me to come back to EDUCAUSE and to take part in their session there yesterday, which I did. And if we have time at the end, I want to talk for a couple minutes about the other sessions I sat in on, but my main focus is sharing what came of that particular session. And for clarity's sake, at CMU, we actually use at least 3 Respondus products. We have what I guess we could call original Respondus. It's known as just Respondus. And it gets tricky because the company's name is Respondus, and I'd like to talk to them sometime about their product naming, but not today. The Respondus product is an exam production tool. So if you have tests that are PDF format or test banks, Word documents, that sort of thing, really what this tool is designed to do is help you get those from those other formats into Blackboard-compatible formats. If you have tests that are Blackboard only, you can actually pull those out into Respondus and make those into other formats too. So it's actually this bi-directional tool. We chiefly use it to go from non-Blackboard to Blackboard format, but it can do the reverse as well. We've used that since we've had Blackboard, more or less. It's been many, many years of licensing that product. We also, for the last at least 6 to 10 years, have used their Respondus Lockdown Browser product. Lockdown Browser is really, in a lot of ways, just like what it sounds like. It's this limited browser experience that routes a user directly to CMU's Blackboard login page. It doesn't allow any extra tabs or printing, copy, paste. All shortcut keys are shut down. It's meant to provide a more secure browser for online quizzing and testing. And so that's been in use here at CMU for a long, long time. The newest product, though, for them and for us in-house is the Respondus Monitor product. And Monitor adds an additional layer of security to the lockdown browser environment that actually monitors a student, that oversees a student while she's testing by using microphone and audio for the microphone and video on the student's webcam. So the student's actually being recorded while she's testing. And so I was there to speak to our experiences at CMU in implementing these solutions and how things have gone and how we've done things here. What aspects do you think we should focus on, Kendra, for the audience today?
Well, I think when we started talking about this session late last week, we finished last week's session with everything that happened. We kind of didn't introduce what we were going to do this week, which kind of worked out into our favor. Kept talking about, attending this conference. And so we started talking about testing and exams and what do we do here at CMU and what works and doesn't work, and really helping faculty understand why we do what we do in the products. I appreciate you describing the products because I just learned something after all of these years of using these products. But to really understand why we're doing what we're doing, what's the benefit of those tools. If they're teaching online, some of these things are probably already implemented for them in the course design. But also there's that opportunity, hey, I can't take up class time to do this exam. Is there a better solution for me, but I want to provide some security to it. So talking about what those options are for them, even in a face-to-face course or as we move more and more into the hybrid environment, and we continue to talk about hybrids, what are those options for folks? So, but really, to kick things off, to really know, why do we test? What are we testing for? Loving this graphic we have up here. I found this as we were getting ready. But, for folks to really think about why they do what they do is just as important as the exam or test itself.
No, absolutely. And this cartoon obviously is poking fun more at our K-12 colleagues. Is this the test to test us for the test to see if we are ready for the test? And I'll say with this caveat, whatever your feelings might be with respect to objective assessment, multiple choice, true, false, matching kinds of questions and tests, whatever our individual sentiments are related to those things, that type of assessment still plays a really big part in lots of courses. It's not just an online course kind of thing. And that's why I'm glad you mentioned classroom courses, because one of the things that's become prevalent, it's sweeping higher ed to an extent. I've seen a lot of it here at CMU, is the notion of the flipped classroom. And that's why with a face-to-face instruction model, right, the whole idea between the flipped classroom is you move out of the classroom the things that students can and should do on their own. Readings, maybe watching video content on core concepts and so forth, and save the classroom time for things that really can only be done when you get people gathered together, which for me has always been kind of an irony about giving tests in class, because you really are. We're going to get all these students together in one physical space so that they can all do something all alone simultaneously. The alone activity is testing. And, we've got an important question or a couple questions on the chat. We don't always know why we're giving a particular test. And for that matter, what are we trying to measure with the test? And hopefully we're trying to measure learning, ability, application. But too often testing can measure how well you've managed to memorize, how effective a crammer you are. And I know from firsthand experience, that's what it measured many times for me, how much I could jam into my shorter-term memory to run in, regurgitate, and begin forgetting immediately. And Jim Terrell, the previous director of Facet, used to cite a particular study about student retention over time, and it was a favorite of his to talk about students that had taken a particular course and students who had not. And if you look far enough out into the future, their knowledge body from the content of that course became increasingly similar. So assessment, probably a discussion for another day, but
for sure.
authenticity should be our goal. That being said, you touched on a few things I want to hopscotch around. If you teach online at CMU and lots of other places, you receive a package of content, and the assessments are part of that content. And the testing models, by and large, might be part of that content. But in most cases, we don't have the security measures being dictated. In our online undergraduate psychology program, Respondus, LDB, and Monitor is the standard. Third-party proctoring is an option for students. The majority are not following that road anymore. They're taking advantage of the technology tools. But I think it's important that we consider the nature of the assessment. How important is this? The reason we went this way, to backpedal and unpack more of the history, CMU, many years ago, you remember it, you and I both took tests there, the testing center. Kendra, do you remember?
Oh my gosh, you walk in, there's a bank, several banks of little teeny tiny lockers, you crammed your backpack in, you gave them your ID, you took a little Scantron, you went into this big room. Yeah, I remember those days well.
You take me back. Scantron was at EDUCAUSE. They had a booth, and I couldn't help but think, and it looked like they had really done some modernization, but I thought, there's a Scantron booth? Where did they park their stagecoach? Because it's this paper model. But so the testing center closed years and years ago on campus, and the only sort of CMU testing center is reserved for small-scale, high-stakes, GMAT, GRE, those kinds of tests. And you remember, like I do, when we moved into this building in the winter 98, 99, we designated a closet space.
Literally
a testing room. It was set up for at most 2 students to test at once. And I think during your tenure with CMU Online, you had to grow it to 4 seats.
The max of 4. In literally a closet, if you had somebody came in and had to be testing at the same time and literally climbing over bodies, or people would have to get out, walk out of the closet to let someone in, it was kind of bad.
And it was usually hot in there, and yeah, we called it the testing closet, response to Todd's question there. And it was adequate, because in that era, the vast majority of students studying online were located away from campus. So it was sort of a rarity to even have a student come in and use us as their proctor. That's not the case anymore. As we shared in our premiere episode, up to 32% of online undergraduate students now are in fact also studying physically in classrooms on the main campus. So over time, we outgrew that space, established some additional space here in this building, established some more space on the main campus in the Park Library building, began outgrowing that space. The foot traffic at lots of Michigan centers for testing was ramping up. We were outgrowing this approach to testing, and then further discovered that students were driving great distances sometimes when they weren't here in town to find a proctor. Because the other thing that happened, I think, we can't ignore the economics that went along with all this. That lots of places that used to be well-resourced, public libraries, other schools, that were willing to let our students come in and be proctored for free, suddenly were less able to do that. And it wasn't this, I think there's this notion, well, why did they stop? Why won't they do it anymore? It's not that they wouldn't, it's that they couldn't. They weren't open anymore. They didn't have as many librarians on staff. Belts got tightened all over this country during that same period. And so then we found students were not only traveling, but they were having to pay. And that comes about as they're not testing at schools or libraries. They're going to other kinds of facilities. Like where are they going that charges for tests?
Well, I think we're finding that they would go, even some libraries and so forth might start charging, but your Sylvan Learning Centers, any of your for-profit learning centers, schools, it's not as easy or conducive for them. They might be using teachers, but the teachers are doing it on their own time, and in order to have access to the schools and the facilities and just that overhead cost. Schools are cutting back and trying to find ways to make money. Community colleges, while they're willing to serve, or other universities or groups, while they're willing to serve any student, that's not their student. So there has to be a give and take for both sides to gain on that. But we started hearing about students paying, $10 per test. okay, you might not think that's too bad. But when you have 4 exams in a class and potentially a chance to retake those exams 1, 2, 3 times, it can start to add up. So are the students really getting the best experience? And we won't get into the whole testing and retesting and all of that scenario. But, were they being given the best possibility a testing environment? To think about that as well.
Well, I think I'm going to turn that on its side and look at another angle on it, because I agree. Is that even the old testing closet, was that ideal? That $10 is cheap. I see it from the audience. Some student may have paid $40 per test. Well, so then with your thinking, 3 or 4 tests for this course, maybe I'm taking 3 courses. So now I'm spending tuition-type dollars again just to get my test taken. You take that these locations might be high volume, ours or somebody else's, and I'm not going to say this is the case, but I'm going to ask the question. That should keep us both out of trouble on this. But so you've asked, are we providing the best scenario situation for the student? I'll ask this. Are we in these kinds of situations where there might be one proctor overseeing who knows how many students in this sort of large space? They're all maybe taking different tests, different courses, different restrictions. Are we still providing the same sort of security that our teaching faculty think is being provided, that we all believe is being provided? It's a question of standards, I think. Because by and large, I suspect the answer is yes. I think we have a lot of proctors who take the work very seriously. But what if those cases where they simply could not, where the volume was just too great, the priorities, the demands on their time, just too many to get through those kinds of things? And that's where these technology solutions, I think they have the potential to do it better. And one of the things we really delved way into in the EDUCAUSE session is how at CMU, and how University of Akron was represented as well on the panel, how we arrived at this solution, at the Respondus solution. Because anybody that starts looking for technology-supported test integrity solutions is going to find all sorts of things. There are remote proctoring, live proctors who might be located in a data center in, say, Florida or Pakistan or California or somewhere in Europe, and they're watching students take tests live. So they're a virtual proctor for hire. And if you get into the data there, they might be watching Hollywood squares of maybe 4, 8, 16 people testing at once in little boxes. Here's what I shared with the audience that came to the session yesterday that I want to float past our audience and you today. What led me personally to feel as though LDBRM is the right solution is for 20 years we've been involved in online learning. And in order to make the testing part work, objective testing, objective assessment part work, we've had to artificialize the process. We had to inject all this bureaucracy between instructor and student, where historically that process, it involved the instructor. In almost all cases, the instructor's there, she's watching her students while they test. So then you fast forward, you say, we're going to put your class online, your students are never going to be in the same room with you, but don't worry, we'll have these other people watch them while they test. So for 20 years, that's been our accepted paradigm, and it's served us really, really well.
Sure. I like where you're going with this. And we remember the days of when we first started online proctoring and so forth, and it's a shift. It's a good shift, but there's always that concern, and you and I have faced it for years, trying to convince, that's the word I'm looking for, help them understand the process and help them feel secure in the process. And that's where technology, thankfully, has come along and helped. And so one of my questions for you, as you were talking about in Respondus Monitor, is the video component of that. And can you talk a little bit about how that video component works a little bit for those that are with us today? I'm not sure. I know Tammy has experienced this some in the courses that she's teaching. I'm not sure about the others. But how that's working, and maybe a little bit as to how it's working here at CMU from a security standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some things that are just the way it works from a product perspective. And I couldn't agree more with what's coming in on the chat. We need to know that we take these issues, we need our students to know, we need to believe, and have it be true that we take all of this seriously, that academic integrity matters here at Central Michigan University, as it should everywhere. And so some things are standard to the product. When monitor is required on an assessment, the student must go through a sequence that checks and verifies that they have a webcam and audio recording device present. For most students, we found it's built in. I made the joke in the session yesterday that we had some apprehension, so we listed a webcam for purchase on the online bookstore, and that I'm willing to guess that it's the worst selling product of all time. Because as it turned out, most students had the hardware they needed. We've kept the choice in place, so this is the first point of flexibility where a student can say, no, I don't have a camera, I don't want to get one, my proctor lives upstairs and it's free. So it was fine for them to continue being proctored, and we've kept those mechanisms in place. But from there then, what happens next is largely the choice of the instructor. The student, of course, is recorded while she tests. That's a standard piece. But a student can be asked to take a head and shoulders photograph. They can be asked to show photo ID. So we're solving a lot of the challenges that are put in front of us about knowing whether the student testing is the student registered and so forth, which is nice. Students can be asked to do what's called an environment check, where they're expected to take their webcam, I'm moving my hands as though everyone can see me, but check their surrounding area and verify that their book's not out, that they don't have a roommate sitting nearby to help them with answers. And even after all of that is said and done, an instructor can still offer additional information too. So it's super customizable, and all of this leads to the second thing that I shared in terms of why we chose it at Central Michigan University. So after this 20-year stretch in the industry, and it's not just a CMU thing, that's why I say the industry, of sort of artificializing the experience, we've taken this huge leap toward putting the best information available, the video and audio recordings of the student who's testing, back in front of the people who want it and need it the most, the instructor of those courses. Now, it's important, I think, that we get real at this stage of the conversation. If you're teaching a 25-student class, and each of those students takes an hour or two to take their exam, that you may easily have 50 hours of video that you could review. And I know some people have watched every minute of every video. That's great if it works for them. Oh, that's an important point, that there's no breaks between these segments. So the recording is going to pick up everything. Excellent point, Tammy. Thank you. We get this information back in front of the instructor, and the number one value is a deterrent factor. It's the same value of proctoring. Someone's watching. Someone may see if I cheat, if I do something I know I'm not supposed to do. I'm being recorded. That capture is going to include me grabbing my book, me pulling out my tablet, me yelling over, to my roommate, hey, what'd you put for the question about Freud and his theory on dreams, and getting help I shouldn't be getting. And it's all going to be captured. And what's been interesting, you watch these things and you think, okay, if students are defeating it, and suddenly they're going to be acing every test. All the data is put on a dashboard for the professor's use, and it's sortable. So you can sort by the amount of time students took in an assessment, the scores they earned. You can expand and contract and see thumbnails of student video. It's really a very sophisticated solution. And in some respects, quite honestly, there was a gentleman in the session yesterday. He said, well, I teach a class of 400.
Ouch.
Right? And he said, I can't imagine trying to watch all this video. And I explained that I wouldn't expect that he would watch all this video, that it really would be a function of developing his own algorithm, and sorting the data in a way that he felt he could observe suspicious trends. Now, here's a little preview, though. Respondus is looking in a direction of having software-based video analysis features in the future. They didn't put a timeline on this, but they're looking at having a product that would possibly flag certain video for students' eyes were diverted, or they left the frame, or that would help that would really, really help faculty, I think, more quickly identify video worth their attention. But that being said, if I were giving a test in my class, when I give a test in my class, if it's a 1-hour exam, 2-hour exam, 3-hour exam, that's time I would have spent, ostensibly at least, watching those students test. Well, now I don't have to do that. So it wouldn't be unreasonable, in my way of thinking, to then spend that hour or two scouring the video, if I so chose. Kendra, you want to add something, I can tell.
Or in that 2 or 3 hours that you've saved yourself, could you be updating your exam or your next exam for more critical features that you're looking for out of that exam, out of that testing? So it's saving you time. And like you said, you could take that time to scour the video or whatever you need to do, but also it lends that opportunity to enhance that learning by creating a better exam and so forth because of that time saved.
And I haven't even shared this with you yet. You're just that perceptive and forward-looking. One of the audience members asked a question that sparked some discussion about time-synced item analysis. So matching a student's video with when he or she was answering particular questions and how that looks across the performance for the whole course. I think we're going to see some fascinating things come out of this solution. The interesting thing for me, and this became an offline after the session conversation, and I see we're getting close to the end today, but the thing that was curious for me is the first thing that we have to accept, and I'll pick on this gentleman from the audience a little bit. He thinks he's able to monitor 400 students live while they test. He's wrong. And that's a tough corner to turn for people. Recording them individually is superior right out of the gate. If you start adding some of these other things to it, it's vastly superior. But we have to accept first the dismissal of the myth that eyewitness testimony, that what we're watching, that we can actually watch large numbers of people do something effectively in certain settings. You'll catch the most obvious things. Of course we will. But some of the more subtle ways, and let's be honest, when we start to talk about really dedicated cheaters, they get more and more creative with their craft. So there are other things that we have to consider. But on that note, we are getting toward the end, and this separate microphone thing seemed to work okay. People think you sound a lot better.
It has worked, and as always, we make things work. It's what we do. It's what we do best. So, again, welcome back. I want to preface next week's show just slightly. The plan is, and it's always subject to change, but bringing closure to a course. I know we're not quite at the end of the semester yet or the end of the term, but by the time we do this session next week, hopefully instructors are getting ready and planning ahead for the end of the term. So hopefully we can bring some tips and tricks for you as you plan for the end of the semester.
Next week's topic is what, in a nutshell? I think you probably just said it, but I'm tired, so hit me with it again.
Bringing closure to your course.
Nice summary. So in the meantime, the important thing to remember, everyone, is to keep calm and aim for the meaty part of the curve.